Okay, this particular article was pointed out to me by one of my subscribers. They asked me if I wanted to respond to it. It's one of these wannabe AA intellectual types. I'm sure everybody's running the one or the other in those meetings from time to time. I remember this one guy that claimed that he taught at all these prestigious universities when he was younger, and he would sit there in meetings and he would, hold the side of his head like he was just having pain with all of his thinking while he was talking. And he would hold up a cup, like I remember at one point, he's like, so technically if the cup is your higher power, the coffee cup, and you are the cup, and the cup is you. And, it was just a lot of bullshit, really. But I remember one particular occasion, he claimed he taught psychiatry and psychology. I was a little bit skeptical about that because he said when I forgot what university he claimed to be attached to, but he said when he was hired and he walked in, he said the first thing he did was he told them that there would be no more teaching of Jung, there'd be no more teaching of Freud, there would be no more teaching of Lacan. It was all dead, and it had no place in education now. And I remember I was sitting outside smoking a cigarette at the time, and I said to somebody, you can't actually just do that. When it comes to however a university chooses to have on an educational curriculum, okay, you can't just walk into a university where you've been hired on to teach and say this curriculum will no longer be honored and it will no longer be followed. It's dead. Without any kind of, without anybody protesting it or anybody saying anything about it or any kind of feedback or blowback or anything. He just claims that he just walked in there and said this curriculum is dead and won't be taught anymore. And I remember this moron that I was sitting outside with and I was smoking when I explained you can't do that. Okay, you can't walk into any school where you're a teacher and just say this isn't going to be taught anymore. And it's just honored like that. And the person just kept saying, well, he sure said that's what he did. He sure said that's what he did. He said he went in there and told them it was dead. Well, when someone's that out of it, I mean, it was useless to talk about. Granted, in psychiatry or in psychology, a lot of what Freud taught and a lot of what Jung actually taught, a lot of it is considered somewhat out of date in psychiatric circles or in modern psychiatry. Some of it is considered no longer accurate, but it would be impossible to just do away with a curriculum or to say that they can't be looked at or taught or examined any longer because all three of those individuals from Lacan to Jung contributed a lot to psychology. So you can't just say that the whole entire thing is dead and we can't teach you anything modern on that. And that's why I said I was a little bit skeptical of his claim on that. But this is another one of these AA intellectuals who wrote this article. And it's funny, by the way, somebody asked me about this in a private comment. The type of college I went to personally, it was technical. It was for information technology. So I learned a lot about connectors and wires and monitors and screens and things like that. I didn't learn anything, about psychology or philosophy or anything in there. As a matter of fact, when I was borderline homeless for a little while after I got that last DUI and was in drug court and was virtually unemployable, I just happened to be I was lucky. I lived within walking distance of a main library, and I just, I had a dictionary and I had a notebook in there, and I would just drag out books and I would read on stuff. It wasn't, and when it comes to something like philosophy or any of these subjects, I'm certainly no expert on them. I'm certainly not even close. I mean, if you were to take what some of these philosophy majors talk about in terms of normatives and meta-narratives and all of that, I mean, that would go completely over my head. So I'm not some educated genius up here arguing from whatever standpoint. I'm not, like some well-educated dude in the matter. As a matter of fact, really, there's a YouTube channel, and I'll post a link in the bottom of the comments. It was called School of Life or something like that. Where it can sum up a lot of philosophical viewpoints within a 9 or 10 minute video, and it can give you pretty much a good basic idea. It won't be able to convey, what stacks and stacks and stacks of books would convey, but it can give you a generalized idea, and it can do it really quickly. And really, when it comes to debunking something irrational like this cult bullshit, you don't really need any kind of really major education for that. What I would suggest everybody do who's trying to leave AA or get out of AA is get on a computer and Google logical fallacies. There is one particular website that I'll also put a link to in the bottom of this video about logical fallacies. And I don't have a good grasp of all of them. There are some that even now I don't quite fully, have a 100% grasp on. I'm aware of the most common ones that I bring up in these videos because they're done the most. It seems like you certainly see a lot of them in the press, and you certainly see a lot of them in politicians, and you certainly see a lot of them in Facebook comments and YouTube comments and a lot of other, you know what I mean exactly. They're blatantly obvious once you know a little bit about them, but just reading about those and reading a few books on my own is how I learned the things I've learned when I talk on here about anything to do with any of these subjects. It's not like I'm some really well-educated dude that's, so much smarter than everybody else. What I learned, anybody could learn easily on their own. It doesn't make me a philosophy major. It would just make you enough that you have a kind of a layman's idea of it, in other words. But anyway, before I derail the topic, here we go. This guy wrote this article that says, "Are you too smart to be in AA?" I've heard this so many times, Nobody's dumb enough to get AA. There's a lot of people who are too intelligent. I had a lot of people insult me in AA because they assumed because I was well-read, and that's all it is, by the way. It's just well-read. I just like to read books. That was all it is. It's not like, again, I went to some prestigious university or something. But they would actually say to me, "You think you're so much smarter than all the rest of us. You think you're, intelligent, and, well, you can't stay sober." That's when all else fails. That's what they attack you with, and I think this article is going to be more of the same, but I'm going to jump into it and see. And so the guy opens up with, "One of the major stumbling blocks for a lot of people coming into Alcoholics Anonymous for the first time is that, well, no one will ever mistake an AA meeting for a Mensa gathering." Well, he's actually got a point there. The blue and gold Cub Scout banners, the constant God references, and what appears to be parroting of the slogans by much of the constituency is a huge turnoff for the intellectually inclined. First disagreement right there. You don't have to be intellectually inclined to see through the irrationality of AA. Okay, that's kind of you're painting a picture that's not quite accurate. You're just saying the only people that'll be bothered by what goes on in AA are people who are intellectually inclined, as you call them. No, I mean it doesn't take anybody with some intellectual inclination to kind of see that there's a lot of absurd things that they're teaching and a lot of absurd things going on and a lot of hypocrisy. Let's not ever forget how much hypocrisy goes on in there. But you don't have to be an intellectual to see the phony bullshit of it. I mean, I know a lot of people, who are not what I would call intellectually inclined. I wouldn't call myself intellectually inclined. But it doesn't take some brilliant genius to figure out there's something bad wrong with AA. So you've already started out with you've already started out kind of on a false premise here. As well as those who just think they're smarter than they really are, like me sometimes. As well as those who think they're smarter than they really are. So you've already opened up this article on a character attack. You kind of made a subtle hint that if you're a little bit intellectually inclined and you have a problem with AA, you're smarter than you think you are. You're not really smart, you just think you are. And then he tries to get out of it by saying, "Like me sometimes." I used to see that shit happen a lot in AA. When I got to an AA meeting, I thought I was smart. I thought I was much smarter than everybody else. And then I almost died drunk. And I had to listen to what these people were saying. I had to get off of my pride, This is hardly anything fucking new you're telling me here, but it's just amazing how smug you can sound within the first few sentences. I'm sure that Plato and Socrates rest easy knowing their reputation as Western civilization's greatest thinkers will never be threatened by an organization that espouses the credo, "If I don't take the first drink, I can't get drunk," as the cornerstone of their philosophy. That's not the cornerstone of their philosophy. The cornerstone of their philosophy, it's not a philosophy. Okay, so you already made another mistake here. It's not a philosophy at all. It's a religious cult. And if you don't want to use the word cult, if the word cult makes you uncomfortable, then just throw away the word cult and call it what it is. It's a religion. Okay, the cornerstone of the religion is that you are diseased and powerless, and unless you have a higher power do it for you, you'll never get better. That is the cornerstone. If I don't take the first drink, I can't get drunk. It's just a part of the slogans. That's not the cornerstone. I mean, just read how it works, since you're this big AA intellectual that thinks you're smarter than everybody else sometimes. The whole entire crux of how it works at the end is we're alcoholic, can't manage our own lives. No human power can, and God could and would if he were sought. That's the cornerstone. They read it every meeting. It's not about don't take the first drink, okay? And now he goes on. But being clever or smart has absolutely nothing to do with being able to get or stay sober. And in fact, it has been my experience that believing there's an intellectual solution to alcoholism is really one of the biggest obstacles to getting sober, especially if you're doing it in AA. Well, what do you call an intellectual solution to alcoholism? It would be my experience. I mean, other than what you're saying here is mere opinion. You're saying it's my experience. It's been my experience that religious fanaticism that's not grounded in any type of reality, okay, is a big obstacle to getting sober. So, I mean, if you're just saying that is your opinion and your opinion only, then I can respond with, this is my opinion and my opinion only. But I don't think anybody has ever tried to beat an addiction with intellectualism. I think you're creating something that's not there. Okay, I've never known anybody... for instance, like if they're diabetic, and I'm not making the comparison to diabetes and addiction, two wholly different things, but I'm using this to make an example. If someone says I'm borderline diabetic and I need to get my blood sugar under control, I don't think anybody who's in that predicament has ever said something like, but, I believe there's an intellectual solution. I don't think anybody who's wandering the streets with a needle in their arm or anybody who's drinking at 2 o'clock in the morning like I used to do when I would get the shakes, I don't think any of us ever said, I'm trying to solve this with intellectual solutions. So you're painting something that's not really real, is it? I mean, when I got to AA, I never said I'm going to try to intellectually solve my problem. I said I need to figure out a fucking way to quit drinking. But I've never seen nobody come to AA and say there's an intellectual solution and then they keep getting drunk. Not in my experience there or any experience of anybody else I've ever known. If any of you out there have attended AA meetings, did you ever see anybody come in and say, I got a bad drinking problem and I need to overcome it, but I'm gonna read about the history of economics in order to do it? I mean, what you're painting here is something that doesn't exist. And then he goes on, as my friend who studied at Oxford told me, when I came in, I was trying to figure it out because I thought it was an intellectual endeavor, but it's not. At some point, it just clicked. Oh, shit, I have to do stuff. Okay, oh, my God. This guy probably thinks he's being brilliant by writing this. You don't come in. The only reason that I ever tried to figure things out in AA was because what they were saying sounded like nonsense. Okay, that was the only thing I was trying to figure out. I used to see a lot of people in AA meetings, and they would sit around and they would say things like, when I got here, I was trying to figure it all out. I was just trying to figure it all out. Well, it's no wonder you're trying to figure it all out, because you're sitting in a room full of people that one minute they tell you, you're powerless over alcohol and you'll never quit drinking, and then they turn right around and tell you it's your choice. You're sitting in a room full of people that tell you that tells you, you can believe anything you want to believe, but you have to come to believe in a higher power exactly as we dictate him to you through our big book in order to get sober. First you get, one message, then you get another message, and when you're getting mixed messages from both sides of the fence, naturally, the first thing you're trying to do is figure it all out. And since AA has such ringing endorsements from both the government and the educational system and the treatment center system and pop culture industry, and every other TV series nowadays has to have some alcoholic on it who's in the program that has to, they have to have some scene or something where they're in an AA meeting. Just total cultural pressure here. But again, nobody that I'm aware of comes into AA saying, I've got to figure this out as an intellectual. No, usually it's been my experience, since you're going to say your experience, it's been my experience that people are trying to figure it out because they don't want to go back to getting drunk again, and they're told this is the only group that can do it. So there again, oh shit, I have to do stuff. Well, here's the thing, I did do stuff. Okay, I did all the steps. I was sponsored by one guru right after the other. I did all the service work. I showed up, I cleaned bathrooms, I emptied ashtrays, I made coffee. I did all of that stuff. And it didn't do anything for me at all. So where are you going to go with that? He goes on to say, I was reminded of this a couple of days ago when I went to a morning meeting where my friend, a former film student, was celebrating 26 years, and again later that night, when the anniversary speaker was a woman who had been a consultant at Arthur D. Little in the 60s and 70s before drinking herself homeless and nearly to death. Okay. Although their stories were nothing alike, they essentially gave the same reason as to why they were unable to get sober initially. Well, they always say this shit in AA. It's not like they're saying anything original. The very same thing that one person says, another person says, but I'll play along and see what they're saying. I thought I was smarter than everyone here in AA until I found out I couldn't think my way out of it. Well, there again, nobody says that except old-timers who are trying to impress everybody with the regurgitated nonsense that they've heard a million times before. I didn't get to AA and say, oh yeah, I'm smarter than everybody in the fucking room. I know more than everybody here. I never did that. I came to AA in a lot of freaking pain. I came to AA in a lot of agony. I came to AA because I couldn't put the bottle down, okay? And I still couldn't quit drinking, doing what they told me to do. I never sat in the back of the room and said, I'm smarter than this whole fucking crowd, God damn, I'm so fucking smart, I never did that. Nobody else that I ever saw did that either. Okay, not the people that were homeless, not the people who wandered in with needles in their arms, not the people that I saw that were really struggling with relapses and everything else. They never did that. They never had the attitude that you're talking about and describing here. You're describing something that doesn't exist. You're describing what every old-timer says when they're getting their medallion. I got here and I thought I could beat this thing. And I thought I was smarter than everybody else. But then I got, this, and then this happened, and that happened, and then they tell some really far-out stories that couldn't have ever happened, and then they tell you how they were whipped and how they surrendered and blah, 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 blah. But nobody that I ever encountered, including myself, ever sat in AA and said, I'm smarter than everybody else. So you're painting a straw man. Okay, it's a straw man argument you're using here. Go look that up in Logical Fallacies. You're creating a position that nobody has taken, and you're attacking that position as though you're invalidating everybody that has a problem with AA. You seem to have this picture you're painting where everybody who doesn't get sober in AA or has a problem with it is sitting in some secret group outside the meeting saying, God damn, we're intellectuals. God damn it, we're fucking smart. We got motherfucking degrees. We don't need, we're doing wonderful. I'll tell you this, by the way, for all of my self-education and reading and everything, when I was drinking myself to death, I wasn't feeling very fucking intellectual. I was feeling like I need another drink to survive the day. Oh, now he's going to use this guy. Have you ever noticed in AA how this happens? Like anytime they need to back up their case with something, they always come up with the same thing. I knew this guy. Bill W. does it all throughout the big book. There was this friend of ours. There was this guy I knew. Isn't it convenient how anytime you need to back up something with your case, you always have this, there's this guy. I bet you anything there is no guy. I bet it's just something they make up to... But anyway, this guy, John, got sober at 24, but bounced around a few years before becoming willing to take suggestions that allowed him to stay sober. I was an uneducated 22-year-old who was terrified to tell anyone I didn't know what was going on, so I acted like I was smarter than everybody. You keep saying that. Okay, the only people that I know of that behave in any kind of negative way in AA are the people that see what a crock of shit it is. When you used to sit in meetings night after night and you would hear these people say these profoundly fucktarded things, you weren't sitting there, or at least I wasn't, saying, oh, I'm smart. You were sitting there saying, this is idiotic, is what they were saying. But anyway, one day I was approached by a guy who went by the name Don't Drink Tony. Yeah, everybody's got this sober alias. Have you ever just go to a meeting and hang around with some of those old-timer dudes, they'll be like, yeah, when I got here, there was a guy, we all called him Bulldog, and Bulldog was a sociopath, and he would actually pee in behind the dumpster outside in front of all the women, and he'd steal money out of the basket. But goddamn it, he took me through the steps. There was a guy. His name was Roy, and Roy was stealing from the welfare system and had 5 felonies. But he was the most spiritual motherfucker I ever knew. Yeah, there's always somebody with some legendary name. So there's this guy called Don't Drink. Okay, who would end every phone conversation with "Don't drink." After he finished explaining why he didn't have to do what everybody else did, join, get a group, get a sponsor, do the steps, go to meetings, oh my God. He said, if you're so fucking smart, what are you doing in AA? Being smart has nothing to do with it. People are in AA because they are looking for solutions, okay? Actual solutions. And they're not getting them. They're getting horse shit like what you're feeding everybody. There again, you're supposed to be a loving, tolerant organization that welcomes everybody with open arms, but then you want to say, your best thinking got you here, and so there it goes with that. And then he's going to say, and that was my experience as well, and then he's going to say, the first time I came in, I was desperate at first, and I even cried at my first meeting when I identified with a bunch of black guys from Roxbury who drank and felt like me, but as soon as I started feeling better, I started picking apart all the goofy shit in AA. Well, there again, if you're getting treated with goofy shit, any sane, rational human being is supposed to speak out against the goofy shit. Hey, what if your car didn't start one morning, for example, let's say, and you call this mechanic, and the mechanic comes over to fix the car, and he says, well, I know how you can get the car to start. You have to turn your will and your life over to the care of whatever, and then the car will start, all right? And then a month goes by, and you still haven't got the car to start. All of a sudden, what? You're just going to capitulate and say the mechanic must be on to something. I mean, is that seriously what you would have me believe with an example like this? But he goes on. For instance, what kind of dipshits live their lives by slogans like live and let live? Well, that's something they certainly don't do. They love to, as sponsors, pry into every aspect of every moment of your private lives, tell you what's moral and immoral, even though they don't practice any of that themselves. Easy does it. None of them are easy does it people either, for the most part. The ones I encountered, if they didn't get their way at a business meeting or they didn't get their way from sponsees, they would throw temper tantrums. And the other aphorisms that are plastered on these ridiculous banners, only idiots, I thought, prayed. Forgetting, of course, that one of my heroes, Martin Luther King, was a Baptist minister. There again, just because somebody prays doesn't mean anything. Okay, there are great men in history who were Baptist ministers. There were great men in history that were atheists. Okay, it doesn't prove anything. You're assigning, I never came into AA, and most people that I know of don't come in saying only idiots pray. But what does that have to do with anything anyway? So one of your heroes prayed. Does that mean, does that has no bearing on this whatsoever? Only idiots, in my opinion, pray to garbage cans and chairs and choose whatever higher power they want to be. In fact, while we're on this topic, your hero that you're talking about here would have had a major problem with an organization, in my opinion, that said, you can believe in whatever you want to believe in and pray to whatever you want to pray to. Pray to the coffee pot. But by the way, religion ain't going to save you. Religion's for people who are afraid of going to hell. It's for people that's been there. I wonder how many Baptist ministers would be cool with a message like that. I mean, have you ever thought about that since you put that in that article? I mean, how many ministers out there would really accept a doctrine that says you can pray to a microphone if the microphone gets you sober, but if you go to church and pray to Jesus and you don't get sober, obviously that God doesn't work for you. Do you really think that any minister, any Christian minister would endorse that ringingly? It's funny, you guys meet in church basements and yet you bash the church all the time, and now you're going to throw this, my hero as a minister, into the bottom of it. You're so full of shit with this. So after 49 days of not drinking, but eating benzos and smoking weed, not much else, I picked up a drink. And then he goes on to tell this horrible story about how terrible it all was. And then he says, luckily someone told me I didn't have to believe in God to pray, and blah, 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 blah. We've already heard it in every AA meeting you've ever been in. But He claims he started to get it. It didn't matter what I thought or said. It mattered what I did. Well, what you do is you don't drink. It doesn't have anything to do with AA. You know, you want to quit drinking, you quit drinking. If you want to diet and lose weight, you quit eating. So it doesn't matter what you thought or said, but I bet you were willing to sit in a lot of AA meetings and preach a lot of bullshit to people, like you're preaching bullshit here. I mean, I'm sure you had no problem doing that. I'm sure you couldn't wait to be called on and talk about how smart I was when I got here, and until I was whipped and I bottomed out, and then I had to accept it. All of you in this room who think you're smart, well, you're going to probably die if you don't get this simple program. Did I question every step of the way? Yes, but I actually did what they suggested, and it worked better without the analysis. What did you question every step of the way? I mean, you said you did everything without an analysis, so what did you question? Did you go to meetings and say these steps don't make sense to me? Did you go to a meeting and say moral inventories over a drinking problem and saying that it affects my self-esteem if my wife has an affair on me? Saying that kind of garbage, that you questioned that every step of the way. How did you question it since you didn't apply any analytical thinking to it? You just did it without an analysis. Okay. I believe blind faith is really for dopes, and I still believe that today. But yet, that's exactly what you're doing. First, you're going to say you questioned everything. Then you're going to say blind faith is for idiots. And then you're going to say, and you still believe that today. But that's just what you said you did. You said you stopped questioning everything and just did the program. So that's called blind faith. You do realize you're talking out of both sides of your mouth in two sentences. So I say to anyone who's new, question everything, but just fucking do it. No, I did fucking do it. Okay, I did all those steps. I did all that stuff. I hung around for a lot longer than I ever should have, and it did not work. And when it didn't work, I was told that it was all my fault that it didn't work. And then I was also told I just didn't really want it bad enough. And then he says, I heard when I came around that if I did everything that was suggested for 90 days and didn't think my life was actually better, then I could go out and have an awesome party with all the money I saved from not drinking and doing cocaine. Actually, what they say in meetings is in 90 days, we'll happily refund your misery, is what they say, which is very arrogant and condescending when you think about it, because you're saying, buy my cult religion, and if you still don't like it in 90 days, then you can just go back out and drink and die. They don't tell you, well, you know what, you could try AA for a month or two, and if you don't like it, there's smart recovery, there's rational recovery, there's harm reduction recovery, there's Albert Ellis's CEBT, there's cognitive behavioral therapy. There are many alternatives like the Sinclair method that can help you if this isn't doing anything for you in 90 days. They can't even be compassionate like that in AA. Just, if you don't like it in 90 days, go to get drunk, without ever offering you an alternative, which proves that AA is not interested in making you quit drinking. It's interested in keeping you in its religion. As for the intellectual side, this is what I found. Some of the most brilliant people I hear speak at meetings aren't the most educated or erudite. Well, that's not hard to imagine. When I came around the second time, this really bright guy who was always had trouble staying sober and told me he couldn't go to open meetings because he couldn't stand the bad grammar. The last time I saw him at a meeting, he was hammered and drinking Listerine, so it's not the grammar that counts, it's the level of truth behind it. I'd rather listen to an honest speaker with a 6th grade education who really knows about alcoholism, except that there's nothing in AA that gives you any factual information about addiction. But nice try. Then some highly educated but insincere douchebag recite the big book as if he wrote it. Well, two major problems with what you just said. Let's just say what you're telling me is the truth, which I sincerely doubt. But let's just say there was this guy, and he said, I can't go to meetings because the grammar is bad. And let's say this guy, the last time you saw him, he was hammered and he was drinking Listerine. You have no fucking way whatsoever of proving that that's why he was drinking the Listerine. You don't know that there's something wasn't happening in his life. You don't know if something terrible was happening to him. You don't know if he had psychological problems. You don't know if he had psychological breakdowns. You don't know anything about it. You are just automatically leaping to a conclusion that because he didn't like the grammar, that's why he's bottomed out drunk. You are automatically assuming that some fucking moron that can barely read that is in there telling people what to do while they're banging newcomers and stealing from their sponsees is of far greater value than someone who's educated that cannot stop drinking, which is also really quite funny because the program is actually supposed to be for the suffering alcoholic. Not supposed to be for the 6th grade guy that can say something really cool about the 12 steps. It's supposed to be for that guy drinking the Listerine that you said you don't want nothing to do with because, he was too educated for the program. So you've just really, really painted yourself into a terrible corner with that one. The last time I saw him, he was hammered drinking Listerine. You automatically assume it's because he didn't like bad grammar. Now, there's this logical fallacy you might want to look up. It's called correlation does not imply causation, okay? It's kind of like if you wake up in the morning and you see something laying in your yard, whatever it is, could be, whatever, pick an object. Out of all the different ways it could have got there, somebody could have thrown it out the window of their car, somebody could have dropped it while walking by, somebody could have, been walking through your yard taking a shortcut and just tossed it to the side. You just automatically make the assumption that some divine hand of intervention put it there. Okay, correlation does not imply causation. You often hear old-timers in AA say, I've seen lots of people too smart to get this program, but I've never met anyone that was too stupid. I've been around long enough to see how true that is. Well, I'll tell you one thing I have seen a lot of people stay around with long enough. I've never seen nobody, how can I put that, too kind-hearted and too good to get the program, but I've seen a lot of sociopathic assholes with no conscience sit around in those rooms for years and years and years perpetuating lies. I'm just grateful that I was stupid enough to get it. You ever excelled at anything in your life by being stupid? Have you ever, did you ever excel through anything in your entire existence by being stupider at it? And that's so smug and that's so condescending. What this really is some asshole that doesn't like educated people, that the only thing they have to fall back on in life is, I got sober and they did not. That's really the crux of your argument. The smart people can't make it. Stupid assholes like you can. I mean, my God, for someone who's intellectually inclined like you claim to be, you made a total fucking mess here. Anyway, that's 31 minutes. This is not even original. There's nothing original to this. This is just the same old tired, worn-out bullshit that we've heard a million times before, I ain't never seen nobody too stupid to get this. I've seen a lot of people too smart. Well, I've never seen anybody too honest, to get the program, but I've seen a lot of dishonest, lying, low-life, psychopathic pieces of shit that could certainly pull off a good front. Anyway, hope to make another video pretty soon.